The transatlantic gap is no longer subtle. It is widening in ways that are forcing Europe to rethink its own security, raising the question of whether NATO's European members are now beginning to prepare to stand on their own. In Germany, that shift is already visible on the ground, with a massive recruitment drive now underway as Berlin moves to rapidly strengthen its armed forces in response to a changing threat environment. At the political level, Chancellor Friedrich Merz is now backing plans to expand the military to a force of 260,000 personnel, a move being framed as necessary to counter what Germany sees as a growing Russian threat. All of this comes just as around 5,000 US troops begin to leave Germany, a development that is triggering fresh anxiety in Berlin about how secure it remains without its most powerful ally firmly in place. Europe's ability to hold the alliance together is now under scrutiny, as Donald Trump's decision to withdraw troops from Germany puts the spotlight on how much influence European leaders really have over Washington. What is unfolding is not just a policy shift but a deeper rupture, with NATO unity appearing to fray as the United States moves to pull forces out of a key European allied nation. And this is not limited to troop movements alone, because alongside the withdrawal, Trump has also decided against deploying long-range missile systems in Germany, adding another layer to the strategic shift. At the center of that decision is the Tomahawk missile system, with the United States now indicating it will not deploy these weapons in Germany, citing depleted stockpiles linked to the ongoing Iran war. What has raised further concern in Europe is how this decision was communicated, with reports suggesting the announcement came with limited consultation, sending shockwaves across allied capitals. Behind the scenes, US officials have reportedly linked these moves to Trump's growing displeasure with the German leadership, pointing to a more political undertone in what appears to be a military decision. The US is withdrawing 5,000 troops from NATO ally Germany, the Pentagon announced on May 1st, following an order signed by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. The Pentagon said the withdrawal is expected to be completed over the next 6 to 12 months, as units are redeployed or returned to the United States. Officials noted that this drawdown would bring overall US troop levels in Europe back to roughly their pre-Ukraine war posture. The move comes after days of tensions, as a rift over the Iran war widens between Trump and key European capitals, especially Berlin. A senior Pentagon official told reporters that recent German rhetoric on the Iran conflict had been inappropriate and unhelpful for alliance cohesion. The president is rightly reacting to these counterproductive remarks, the official added, directly linking the decision to the political spat. Trump had already threatened earlier in the week to pull forces after sparring with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who said Iran was humiliating Washington over the war. On April 27th, Merz told students that the Americans clearly have no strategy for the Iran conflict, accusing Washington of blundering into a war without an exit plan. He went further, saying an entire nation is being humiliated by Iranian negotiators, who he described as skillfully dragging the US to Islamabad and back with nothing to show.
The Americans clearly have no strategy, and the problem with conflicts like this is always that you don't just have to go in, you also have to get out again. We saw that all too painfully in Afghanistan for 20 years. We saw it in Iraq. So this whole affair is, as I said, ill-considered, to say the least. At the moment, I cannot see what strategic exit the Americans are now opting for, especially as the Iranians are obviously negotiating very skillfully, or rather, very skillfully not negotiating and letting the Americans travel to Islamabad only to leave again without any results. An entire nation is being humiliated by the Iranian state leadership, especially by these so-called revolutionary guards. We offered, as Europeans, and said that we were willing, after the end of negotiations, to help getting the Strait of Hormuz open again. We offered to send in minesweeper boats from Germany to help free the passage from mines, as it has clearly been, at least partially, mined. We can help there, but first the fighting needs to end. And at the moment I do not see how this can be realized in the near future, because the Iranians are clearly stronger than one thought, and the Americans clearly don't seem to have a convincing negotiating strategy. I am sorry to have to say it, but at the moment it is a pretty tricky situation. And it is costing us a lot of money. It is costing us a lot of tax money and taxing our economy. This conflict, this war against Iran is having a direct negative effect on our economy and needs to be ended as soon as possible.
The next day, Trump shot back online, claiming that Merz thinks it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon, and blasting the chancellor as dangerously naive. He added that Merz doesn't know what he's talking about, using the same post to attack Germany's economy and defense record as evidence Berlin should not lecture Washington. Interestingly, by April 30th Merz was striking a more conciliatory tone, stressing Germany's readiness to help clear mines in Hormuz and backing harder sanctions.
And in this spirit, we are also committed to bringing an end to Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz as a matter of urgency. If the necessary conditions are met, Germany stands ready to take military action to ensure the freedom of navigation. Ahead of last week's European Council meeting in Cyprus, I call for the pressure of sanctions on Tehran to be stepped up once again. For if Hormuz remains blocked, this will cause massive economic damage for us all. Our message is therefore that Iran must come to the negotiating table. It must stop playing for time. It must no longer hold the entire region, and ultimately the whole world, hostage. Iran's military nuclear program must be brought to an end. There must be no further attacks against Israel and our partners in the region. On all these issues, we are in close contact with our partners, including, and particularly, those in Washington. We do this in the shared transatlantic interest. We do so with mutual respect and a fair sharing of the burden. And in doing so, we are following a clear course, particularly during this turbulent period. This course remains firmly focused on a strong NATO and a reliable transatlantic partnership.
Back in Germany, the response has been swift and telling, with the army launching a major recruitment drive aimed at drawing in younger citizens amid rising security concerns. Under new measures being discussed, every 18-year-old male could be required to register for military service, signaling a shift in how seriously Berlin is now viewing the threat environment. The German military is now stepping up its outreach efforts, trying to build numbers quickly as pressure within NATO continues to mount in the face of a perceived Russian threat. This recruitment push is not symbolic, but tied to a larger plan, with Germany aiming to significantly expand the size of its armed forces in the coming years. That expansion is part of a broader ambition to build a force of around 260,000 personnel, a number that reflects how much the security calculus in Europe may be changing. All of this is unfolding just as attention turns to a critical moment ahead, with NATO's future possibly hinging on what happens at the upcoming summit in July. European diplomats are now increasingly concerned that Trump may take further steps that could test the alliance, especially if tensions from the Iran war continue to spill over. In response, Europe is beginning to prepare for a scenario that once seemed unthinkable, one where it may have to act independently of the United States if required. That thinking is captured in a stark diplomatic line, suggesting that Europe will work with the US where possible, but without it if necessary, reflecting a shift in strategic mindset. Compounding these concerns is Trump's visible frustration with allies, which diplomats see as a potential risk factor ahead of the high-stakes NATO meeting. As the summit approaches, the alliance now faces a period of uncertainty, with Europe actively weighing just how reliable the United States remains as a long-term security partner.